In this second part of Loving a Narcissist Online, a Contemporary Love Affair, the story of Olivia Cruelheart, I want to further consider some of the dynamics of long-distance online relationships and how vulnerable people can be to manipulation via them. I think it's worth considering why people turn to the internet in order to meet someone, and why a long-distance relationship conducted via electronic mediums of communication becomes attractive to certain people. Now, obviously, there are many reasons people seeking escape from localities hoping to find a better life via someone else is an obvious reason. Clearly, if people were able to meet suitable people in their localities, they wouldn't be on the internet looking to meet someone. This gives rise to one of the great dangers of online relationships. They can function as surrogate relationships, stand-in relationships, while the more valued partner secures someone suitable locally. There is a great danger in these type of relationships of one party becoming a foil for the actualization of the more valued member. Indeed, it's probably true to say that if one or other party can meet someone locally, they eventually will, and the relationship will end. These types of relationship depend on two unusual people sharing rare qualities and being committed to one another because of the rarity of the qualities they experience via their relationship, and obviously these conditions will not often be satisfied. This is probably why so many who embark on online relationships across a distance end up feeling used. There's a great danger that the less socially valued partner will function as an ego battery for the more prestigious partner. This was certainly what happened between Olivia and I. My isolation and devaluation led me to provide exquisite sources of significance for Olivia, which were originally powerful and enduring, but it was impossible for me to sustain the novelty of the experience, and the more time we spent online, the more familiar the terrain we constituted became, until she sought new sensuous experiences that I could not provide. I could only exist as an immaterial presence, a text on a screen whose interaction was fueled by the vibrancy of Olivia's loneliness. And whilst I could enhance her soul and empower her via the significances I constituted her via, it was an inferior experience. I could never provide the sensuous pleasures, the experiences of being perceived amid significant others and prestigious spaces that mattered so much to her. Once she met a prestigious man, she no longer needed her soul caring for. Once she could connect through him to a public world that exhibited their value. What Olivia really wanted was someone to connect to a sphere of public existence via, whose forms she experienced value via, so that she felt the pleasure of being perceived via prestigious forms, whose pleasure was doubled by being recognised. A man with money connects her to a space whose appearances she can acquire via forms that constitute an experience of being that assures her via the existence she accesses via being with such a person. Olivia wanted an experience of being inscribed in forms of public value that income provided access to, and this experience changed completely the horizon within which she had found a use for me. I guess this might be a reason for me to be suspicious of any woman who professes love for me. When my relationship with Olivia ended, many women used the argument that because I had no money, she could never have been serious about me. The fact that this issue of authenticity arises indicates something significant about relationships conducted online. If one met someone actually, the nature of their feelings would be manifest via the responses they exhibited while being with us. How we are perceived will be manifest via the sense their recognition disclosed. Their manner and behaviour would itself express their feelings, and we would experience an authenticating medium that allowed us to sense the reality of the relationship. When the relationship is conducted across a distance and largely via typing to one another, 90% of my interaction with Olivia took place through typing, then issues of authenticity become more prominent because it is far easier for one party to control the parameters of the interaction and thereby manipulate how they appear or manage their appearance so as to ensure a desired effect or carefully present self in order to manipulate others. It's also far easier to occlude expressive forms that might betray underhand behaviours, so that the possibility of manipulation becomes more prominent in these type of relationship. It can be much harder to discern the nature of the sense of the distinctions being behaviourally manifest across a distance, because the problematic nature of the relationship leads one to be forced to second guess oneself and excuse so much. The distance becomes something that can cover the behaviours of a person, and this was indeed an argumentative strategy that Olivia used. Any attempt by me to raise issues about her behaviour would be explained away as an effect of the time difference or the distance. This strategy worked well because it meant any issue I raised would immediately reduce to her calling the basis of the relationship into question. The fact that I was so far from her undermined my capacity to have any rights in the relationship. I guess in this sense there was never any relationship, because if someone is not acting as if they are in a relationship, and if the relationship has no practical consequences for their behaviour, then the relationship isn't real. The problem is that the unreality of the relationship can be occluded more easily when the relationship is mediated electronically. It's easier for someone to manipulate someone else via careful presentation of self via such mediums because there is less information available. As miscommunication is an effect of decontextualized interaction, so this feature of electronic interaction favours those needing to obscure the nature of their actions. If you were with someone, you could tell from their demeanour and expression their feelings for you as they perceived you. Your significance would elicit forms you would intuit via co-presence, but these types of information are all lacking in decontextualized communication. It's much harder for someone being misled to perceive the reality of the relationship because communication only occurs when one party intends it to. There is no public context of disclosure via which the real nature of someone can be manifest. One knows only what is expressed and can't embed that in perception of any kind of context, since there is only the words on the screen. The problem with online relationships is the flow of information can easily be controlled by one party via control of when they are available and thereby when interaction can occur. This is why frequency and duration of contact become such significant aspects of these kinds of relationship, and why form of interaction becomes a major stressor. Because one can't easily meet the person, integrity of interaction becomes a key preoccupation. Form of interaction manifests form of engagement. Engagement is manifest via form. One can discern the nature of a person's engagement with us via the effort they make in instantiating appropriate form, and in long-distance relationships, a key manifestation of the degradation of your partner's feelings is a deterioration in their form of expression. What this means is changes in the form of interaction create anxiety, and yet it becomes impossible to refer to changes without appearing oversensitive and insecure. In my relationship with Olivia, as devaluation occurred, she began to continuously manifest my insignificance as a way of manifesting and thereby constituting her own superiority, so that devaluation involves negation. Narcissists derive an experience of being superior via interpersonal forms of effacement that constitute the insignificance of their relationship partner, but these changes are so imperceptible that it becomes impossible to refer to the changes without appearing needy and insecure, so that you end up condemned to silence for fear of appearing negatively. One doesn't want to be an onerous burden to someone that one loves, who is a long way away, and one doesn't want to bog their lives down in the minutiae of relational details that can easily be dismissed as insignificant, despite the fact that we are all tacitly aware of such aspects which modulate our interactions and manifest aspects that affect us. In this way, covert aggression can be carried out under the guise of an unconsciousness, whose physical grammar mean that absence of care can be justified as lack of awareness, because the individual perpetrating the manipulation can claim that they never intended to do what they are doing, and that their behaviour just arises from the pressures on them. In this way, practical strategies can be used to bring about validating positions in relationships without relational partners being able to refer to such insignificant aspects of interaction. What manipulators do is exploit this, so that one can never really call them to order, because everything can be deflected as oversensitivity on the part of the partner, so that the partner being negated cannot refer to the practical strategies manifesting their negation without being further negated, so that the negated merely keep quiet for fear of appearing, as Olivia always accused me of being, negative. What this does is lead people to rationalise before speaking and silence themselves. The state of the relationship and the status of your partner's feelings quickly reduce to the forms of expression and to the behavioural distinctions these forms arise from. So with Olivia, when we met, she had been hurt and was so desperately lonely that she found a long-distance relationship with someone who satisfied none of the criteria she desired in a partner attractive. Her needs constituted my viability. She told me, "I think it's impossible for me to meet anyone." A strange admission from a woman who was with men most days after work, but it did manifest the horizon within which my reality was constituted. When she was needy, then my appreciation served a vital constitutive function in her life and elicited a commitment from her. Her engagement was manifest by her being online for 3 or 4 hours. on the 3 or 4 days that she didn't go out until very late. However, as my appreciation became a sustaining fabric for her soul, something she could partake of, enjoy and use whenever she felt the need, as she recuperated and had means of sustaining her esteem, the vitality of the significances I provided became familiar. Since we could only type to one another, the meanings became prosaic, and as I lost my capacity to use significance to constitute her as significant, I became insignificant and devaluation ensued. The immaterial pleasures of text-based communication could never compete with the public world of valued others that a beautiful woman can participate in, and I began to realise that I faced a monumental struggle to sustain the wonder of our early communication. Loving Olivia became a major intellectual task. The problem was rendered more difficult by the chief effect of devaluation, disengagement. The change in my significance to her was manifest by changes in the form of our interaction. One manifestation of the instrumentalization of our relationship was a change in our interactional patterns. The first sign of this was when Olivia stopped being available throughout her daily life. The first manifestation of a change in my significance to her was when she stopped being available as soon as she left work, thereby confining interaction to her apartment. What emerges via this practically instantiated distinction is a relation between a place and a need. I was being compartmentalized to serve a particular need. My progressive devaluation was manifest by Olivia's disinvestment and by her compartmentalization of me, shifting me from interacting with me as soon as she returned home before she showered to later, and from early evening to progressively later. As I became less significant, the durations and form of our interaction changed. The more someone desires contact, the more fully they engage. Devaluation is manifest via disinvestment, and the person becomes distant. Their loss of interest manifests by a degradation in the quality of their responses. Their loss of engagement manifests by less attention being paid to the form of the interaction. Instead of sustaining appropriate habitual forms of expression that disclose the qualities each experiences being via the interaction, responses degrade as the interaction becomes part of a banal domestic space that it is used to evade. When we first met, Olivia never used text speak and wrote in fuller sentences, but over time, as she engaged with others who were more significant, her disengagement was manifest by the increased brevity of her responses, by the increasing duration between responses, and by the degradation of her forms of expression. By the time she was messaging me for 10 minutes while preparing to meet the new boyfriend, this possibility was manifest by delays in response and by the manifestation of a contempt obvious by the fact that she couldn't even sustain forms of address characteristic of our relationship, thus altering the character of our relationship as her interaction descended into text speak. The mutilation of her prose manifested in the degradation of her feelings toward me. I had become, as she put it, taxing because she was projecting mere engagement with another. Even the way she logged out of Skype changed. Whereas in the early part of our relationship it would take 10 minutes for us to say goodnight, with ritualized arrangements of emotes denoting the affection of parting, now she could not even wait for a response and would log out after saying good nine, without so much as even an emote kiss. Long gone were the elaborate rows of kisses carefully and ritually arranged as a spontaneous manifestation of a care that needed expression. Now, the irrelevance of my presence was manifest by Olivia not even waiting to perceive my response. This was mainly how I knew she was not going to bed, because if she had been going to bed for the night, even knowing she intended to dump me within days, why would there have been such urgency? Devaluation was manifest by contraction of the time we spent together itself, an effect of a disengagement that meant that the qualities Olivia experienced deteriorated as a direct effect of her instrumentalizing our relationship. Devaluation initiated what she experienced. As she said, things seemed to change. Devaluation affects how we are engaged with, so that it affects how we experience ourselves. When narcissists devalue you, they disengage, and it affects the fabric of the meanings via which you experience the qualities you share. They undermine not just the relationship, but themselves, because they stop you offering them heightened relational experiences. As devaluation occurs, disengagement ensues, and the narcissist removes any capacity for their lovers to create the fabric between them that leads to experiences of higher relational states and greater forms of significance that one enters relationships for. In other words, the narcissist destroys the inner core or the emotional bridge that relationships rely upon. The heightened states of human mutuality that had characterized the earlier stage of our relationship when Olivia engaged and invested time in the relationship were undermined by her loss of respect for our relationship. The biggest problem in a relationship is disengagement. Once one person devalues the other and disengages, the fabric of meanings you create the relationship via becomes stretched thin, and the bond between you atrophies because you are affecting the very medium via which you regenerate it. If one partner devalues the other and disengages, it then makes it impossible for the other to share, because the medium itself that you use to love the other is affected. It just becomes painful as you can't reach them, you can't share. They won't forge the medium of meanings that constitute you as a couple. Other problems arise from this. Commitment is renewed via bonding, and if the medium of your bonding is impoverished, the space of meaning you forge via your relationship, then the terrain of the relationship becomes barren. As Olivia devalued me, she didn't allow us to regenerate the fabric of meanings that bound us. Once that is damaged, you get an inferior quality of love, and things seem to change. Invalidation is central to the relationship, because what narcissists do is derive their own sense of value. They're instantiating a boundary based on negating you. This is why their relationships progressively deteriorate, because as they continuously manifest your loss of significance in order to extort the sense of their own value, they destroy the fabric of your relationship, and they then get an inferior form of relationship, less attention, less affection, less appreciation. As devaluation ensues, you are progressively downgraded, and the temporal and spatial forms of the relationship are constricted, as your significance warrants less presence, until you end up inferior and unable to provide love because they see you as unworthy of intimacy. Once we went into devalue phase, the love and recognition became invasive, because Olivia no longer saw me as worthy of esteeming her, and she began to experience the intimacy we had become accustomed to as insulting, because she now saw me as unworthy. She began to describe the relationship as suffocating, whereas 6 weeks earlier she'd said she'd never felt so close to anyone, and said that the relationship was the deepest she'd ever experienced. 3 weeks earlier she'd said, "I love talking to you more than anyone else." Then suddenly the relationship became taxing, tiring, and not a relationship, it's prison. As she devalued me, the intimacy of the recognition that provided her with the affirmation she loved in the beginning became something she experienced as invasive and insulting. Your degradation renders the intimacy of all you shared violating, and there is a need to exhibit contempt in order to recuperate honour and regenerate the new persona that has emerged in relation to the person that has been lined up as your replacement. Indeed, you can generally tell when a narcissist is grooming you supply by the changes in their expressive physiognomy, because of the way they manipulate others through the derivation of a persona generated via interaction with their target. They find it difficult to sustain consistency, and the valuation they experience leads them to betray their new feelings toward degraded partners. Usually these changes mirror a disinvestment that is part of a recalibration of their lives outward, so that they've usually hooked up with someone else. Throughout the relationship, the incessant hot and cold spells arise from a reinvestment and disinvestment that arises from their personal state relative to their needs for appreciation and affirmation via particular others. As they connect to significant others, you can tell from how their demeanour changes. They fabricate themselves via significant others, and as they do, you lose significance, and this is manifest by their no longer presenting a front to you. Who they deem significant is manifest by how they manipulate their self-presentation in order to manipulate those who now matter. When they have rendered you worthless, they deem you insignificant, and this is manifest by the fact that they no longer present front, because they don't want anything more from you. The person you knew is now unavailable, because they have no need of what you provided, and they've actually denuded you of the means to provide what you had, because they have replaced your function in their lives with others who are now more prestigious. One sign of them setting up new sources of esteem and validation is changes in expressivity, as they mirror the person they have been with, and then fail to switch persona rapidly. Often Olivia would come on late after being with other men and manifest her perception of my inferiority by being critical of my negativity and lack of confidence. Her manner changed radically once my opinion of her was no longer significant to her. Changes in expressivity, therefore, manifest the valuationary processes that structure her interaction. I could always sense differences from the form of expression, but I never understood how to interpret the changes until it was too late. Since she turned to me to satisfy certain needs, and since human needs are diurnal, if suddenly Olivia didn't need those needs satisfied by me, they must have been satisfied by someone else. Once narcissists don't need, they change. When they are satiated, they disengage. As their needs change, people change. With narcissists, their needs are constitutive of the interpersonal reality of others. People aren't consistent entities for them. If they need you, you are valued. Once they find alternative sources that satisfy those needs, the particularity of the way you satisfy the need is irrelevant to them. They are inherently promiscuous because the manner of satisfying the need is irrelevant to them. And once they have the need satisfied, you have no redeeming features for them. You just become taxing because they no longer have a need you can fulfill, and at that point you become a burden who no longer warrants the energy required to generate the personal fabric required to exploit you. The times when Olivia was loving was when she had been alone for a period of time and she became receptive to me and reciprocal. I suspect it's impossible to sustain the relationship because of the devaluation. It doesn't matter how hard you try to share quality moments with them, they just get bored because it gets familiar to them and they cease value in you, so everything you attempt to share becomes worthless. Instead of relating generously, mutually and reciprocally, interaction became characterized by Olivia's derivation of a sense of superiority, manifest by her extortion of a sense of value, be it effacing me, showing my insignificance to her. Emotional abuse plays out on an interpersonal terrain of the meanings individuals experience being, via this reciprocal disclosure of forms that reveal significances. Meaning is an essential terrain for human beings, which is why symbolic forms are so insidious and invasive. You can't protect yourself from negation. If someone you value, someone you love, disrespects you, constantly deriving the meaning of their being via manifesting your insignificance, then you will suffer. The absence of care, the refusal of forms that recognize the value of the other, for example, via apology or gratitude, is part of the deliberate instantiation of a boundary, via which they derive their own value. They violate your boundaries in order to extort a sense of their own. This is why these relationships are toxic, because imputations of inferiority are highly aversive and cause stress responses, which then cause the trauma bonding characteristic of these types of relationship. With a narcissist, the whole relationship from beginning to end is progressive and continuous devaluation. They have to manifest your insignificance behaviourally, which destroys the fabric of the relationship. The whole space of meaning you constitute as a couple is undermined and eroded until you find it difficult to give the quality of the love you feel for them, because they are too busy neglecting you in order to feel good, instead of engaging with you as a loving person who has the power to make them feel wonderful things. As they devalue, they perceive you as unworthy of giving them elevated feelings, because they're busy chatting up competitors and lining up your replacement, all the while lying to you about the status of your relationship and relation to them. What is clear is that these interactional forms are effects of valuationary transactions that take place on the terrain of form and meaning at the heart of the relational dynamic, and that they lead to a sense of malaise and confusion in the devalued partner. One partner wants to experience their dominance in the relationship via the extortion of the sense of a superiority that is at the heart of the form of the relationship. A covert struggle over position is part of the very fabric of the meanings that the relational form is being constituted via, in order to allow one partner to experience superiority. The struggle to ensure dominance is at the heart of the relationship and affects how the narcissist perceives their partner. The reduction of an individual to the service of a particular need leads to a compartmentalization that ensures secrecy about other areas of the narcissist's life. A key problem with the relationship being online, conducted via electronic mediations that involve almost exclusively typing, is that one can't know what is occurring apart from via what one is told. One has no independent way to validate the truth of the account of the other person. Because of this, the form of the interaction as a manifestation of the intent or feelings of the other become incredibly important. And because there's no shared context, one is dependent upon what one is told, and one can only sense via the other's expressivity that there may be a bifurcation between what they avow and what they do. What this means is that chronic insecurity is an essential aspect of these types of relationships. When you're trying to conduct such a relationship with someone who is a narcissist, it all becomes chronically stressful, as they play with the valuation-devaluation hot-cold dynamic arising from the way they modulate their egos via forms of significance derived from others. Olivia always manifested that I had only a peripheral significance to her life by positioning me towards the end of a day, and she never messaged me about when she would be available. So when she came on, I was so relieved that I accepted the form of the relationship. She played with the frequencies and durations of our contact to instill insecurity and extort an experience of her own superiority, and managed my expectations down progressively until I had accepted so little that the relationship had lost any of its means to function as a source of solace for either of us. Deriving significance via manifesting someone else's insignificance is a way of feeling empowered. The very form of the relationship can be used to extort significances that instill esteem via a way of treating someone else that reduces them to the status of an object, a source of something, a meaning, via the relational form that constitutes this aspect, such that the narcissist feels invigorated, soothed, energized, and content. The quality of supply relates to the meanings derived via being subject to forms that relationships provide, which is why narcissists are prodigious seekers of relational partners and why they are so status conscious. The higher the status of the interactant, the more empowered they feel. Once Olivia hooked up with the man she discarded me for, her whole character changed. Empowering oneself arises via the very fabric of the relationship, and that it's both it's both covert and aversive, insidious and insinuating, surreptitious and hard to resist, because you can't contest it without appearing oversensitive. As you experience being negated via the shifting parameters of the relationship, you attempt to recover your position. You attempt to elicit intimacies only to experience your loss of significance, manifest by a refusal of such forms, and the relationship goes into an uncertain territory where it's more like an association rather than a relationship. As you become subject to the devaluation or remediations via your partner, you lose the ability to project via them, because they're no longer disclosing the medium constitutive of the meanings via which you experience being there together, and you feel unsure as to the effect you can have on your partner. As you become aware of your significance via the form of the interaction, as your new inferior status is revealed via the form of the interaction, you lose the ability to project and reach your partner. You feel unable to be silly and playful and flirty, and you become possessed of a sense of a parameter that disavows intimacy. And yet when you ask your partner are things okay, they lie. Throughout and right until the end, Olivia would displace any questions about the status of our relationship and the nature of her feelings, even though her responses manifest that she no longer cared. By the end, I knew not to inquire as to her feelings, because her distance and coldness were so overwhelming, as if she wanted me to know that she did not care, because she needed to show that I was no longer good enough to warrant her attention. And all she would say is, if I was distant, I would just disappear and not come online, a portent of what would transpire. As she withdrew and spent longer and longer unavailable, the compartmentalization and secrecy it ensures increased insecurity. But these effects are done passively, unintentionally, Olivia could claim, as she did. If you unavailable, I assume you're just busy. Even though she knew I would never be unavailable to her, she was using an argument about busyness to justify her unavailability. Just as in the first few days, she justified being in bars every day as part of my line of work. When I realised she was now spending 5 and 6 hours after work unavailable, of course suspicion enters and insecurity mounts. As insecurity mounts, you can't project, you become negative and abject, lacking in confidence as an effect of invalidation and experience of being insignificant, in relation to someone whose power arose from the constitutive effects of valuing you in the beginning. As Olivia disengaged, she stopped disclosing the medium I appropriated via the relationship, and removed my capacity to project via forms she made available, and I lost my capacity to offer her anything positive. As she perceived me as worthless, this disclosed a sense of absence that affected my capacity to project, and I could no longer constitute myself relationally, and I came to appear as she perceived me to be, abject, pathetic, weak, and needy. As I lost significance, that was borne out by her disengagement, and the ever more peremptory manner with which she engaged with me, which constituted the very characteristics she perceived me to be exhibiting because of the way she perceived me. In the end, she realised exactly what I had told her the first day that I'd met her, that she was too good for me and that I offered her none of the things she deserved. The reason she accepted the relationship for the time she did was because when she had been hurt and was lonely, she needed the qualities I made available, and then, once she recovered her esteem, her original goals came to the fore. My viability was an effect of the horizon she experienced possibilities via. When she didn't believe she could have what she wanted, she accepted an online relationship with me as a source of support, appreciation, esteem and affection. But as soon as a man with money became available, the horizon within which she made the decision shifted, and the potential of satisfying new needs more fully ensured that my reality changed for her. Incorporating schemas via her new love object, she morphed into a mirror of the new boyfriend and adopted his contempt for people like me. The very qualities she'd needed when she was in need, sensitivity, a capacity to shoulder the weight of another's pain, an ability to appreciate her needlessly without hope of reciprocity, became objects of contempt, a contempt she manifests as hatred of my negativity. Attending seriously to another requires an ability to love their essence, irrespective of how they are affected by the vicissitudes of everyday valuationary transactions that affect our esteem and demeanour. It is a serious business, and yet the very qualities that made me responsive to her when, as she put it, my life sucks, came to elicit contempt as she perceived me as inferior to her, and a newfound status. As you undergo this deconstruction of the person you were as an effect of the relational forms constitutive of the fabric via which you created a space of meaning that bound you as two, you feel guilt as if you have ceased trying, because the basis of the capacity to project and try and make the relationship work, the very medium you use to relate, has been torn by someone who is essentially absent but present in the relationship, via constituting an absence that ensures the failure of the other and the relationship. One day, about a month before Olivia began betraying me, as she'd begun to disconnect more fully as she set up the transition to the man she replaced me with, I tried to explain to her, if you want the engagement and attention characteristic of love, you have to manifest the same characteristics that you want to experience. So if you don't communicate at all, it makes it harder for me to engage because I feel neglected. She never understood this because I think she just experienced my significance via her devaluation. She just felt she did not love me, and I no longer had the ability to elicit qualities of experience for her, so she lost any motivation to engage or show kindness towards me. For Olivia, it was merely that she did not love me, and the problems were because of my significance. As my significance changed, I lost the ability to elicit powerful feelings in her, and she lost any desire to engage. Boredom is an effect of devaluation. As the individual loses the capacity to engage them, they begin seeking the novel because they can't sustain engagement. As the narcissist mirrors significant others, they fail to develop the key resource required to sustain relationships, an integrity born of sustaining meanings via being them. Because they have an instrumental relation to others who often share their mode of operation, they fail to appreciate the importance of authenticity. It is the core value of relationships characterized by love. Without authenticity, a person will feel nothing and the relationship will feel vacuous. Without love, there is nothing. Olivia failed to appreciate the importance of real feelings because she didn't really feel them. For her, desire is an effect of public value. She feels desire for socially powerful men, and her feelings split around as her recognition shifts with her perception of sources of social value that she might connect herself with via connection with the men who incarnate the form she wishes to appropriate. As narcissists don't seem able to exhibit real feeling, so too they can't intersubjectively donate any experience of real feeling, which makes loving them as pointless as they are vacuous, because they can't impart any sense of being loved. Because they lack empathy, they get bored fast, because the feelings that people attempt to share lack depth for them. Consequently, they don't engage fully, because they don't bond, remaining distant, calculative and cold. Because they don't bond effectively, they don't feel deeply and get bored rapidly. Bonds are not pervasive for them. As soon as someone of higher value enters their orbit, they disengage, and as they shift attention, they begin to hate the person they are with. The energy narcissists extort from us arises via the meanings they enter relationships to experience being. The problem is that their engagement is asymmetrical, and they quickly begin to withdraw as they enjoy what they exhaust their host of, the capacity to generate meanings. No individual can indefinitely constitute us via difference, and the coherence of a space of meaning sustained via mutual recognition and communicative action becomes too tedious as the familiar overwhelms the novel and the narcissist begins looking for someone new. You have to develop a relationship to access the greater heights of human mutuality, but this requires the effort of everyday investment, and this is too banal a reality for the narcissist who desires to exist via the public light, pursuing new experiences via new partners. It seems tragic that human relationships become mired in valuation processes that degrade some and render them a resource for others, but this is characteristic of the processes constitutive of human reality and warrants attention.